AM radio, an op-ed column, and Fox News is not enough. I want a center-right nation to fight for its soul, and its soul is represented in the arts. Its soul is represented in a world in which media is everything. AM radio is the lowest form of communication. It's tinny, it's not robust, it's not Avatar. I want Avatar. I want the right to enter the world of media to the extent and invest in media the way that the left does.
The fake media is trying to silence us, but we will not let them, because the people know the truth. The fake media tried to stop us from going to the White House, but I'm president and they're not.
You're listening to the Curt Schilling Podcast, a Breitbart.com podcast. The podcast starts now. Here's Curt with today's headlines.
Hey guys, welcome to another edition of the Curt Schilling Podcast. Got a good one lined up today. Today we're going to talk to Congressman Jeff Duncan from South Carolina, the 3rd Congressional District, and Jerome Hudson joins us, Breitbart's own Jerome Hudson. But first, we got some sound bites they're not made up. Some of this stuff is so offensive and so wrong on so many levels. For those of you that know me, I was down in Puerto Rico after the devastating hurricane last year. I spent a little over a week, around a week there, trying to get supplies out. And the things that we got to see and be exposed to, the levels of corruption, both on local and countrywide government, was in the stratosphere. Supplies not being taken to the people, being hoarded by the government, lies about the ports that were open. We were told that the ports in the south were open, supplies were flowing in, and we flew over the ports, and all three of them were none of them were open, and one of them was destroyed. They lied over and over again. And I said at the time that I thought the death toll would be much closer to 100,000 than it would be to 10,000. And I still hold to that. I think they're lying in ways I can't even imagine. The things we saw, there are towns in Puerto Rico that are gone. And I mean gone. Like not oh my gosh, look at all the rubble. I mean, you don't recognize the fact that people lived there. They were taken away. There were towns of thousands of people that were cut off for days and weeks. It's well over a year, and they still don't have all the power back. The diabetics that were there died quickly. The elderly requiring medical help died quickly. We know of and were told of and shown family members were burying their own members of their own family in their front yards. It was beyond anything you can imagine, and it had absolutely nothing to do with our government. Our government released those funds, and the FEMA was let go on them immediately, and they were surprised. And I got to tell you, there were some surreal scenes that someday we'll talk about. But anyway, so where we're at now is this country is divided, and the left would have you believe it's President Trump dividing us. But I want you to listen. I got some sound bites say they're going to blow your mind. This first one is one of the biggest. First of all, what the hell are you people doing in Illinois representing or voting for this piece of garbage? On MSNBC, Representative Luis Gutierrez talked about President Trump and Puerto Rico, and he used Omarosa, of all people, as a potential source. Listen to this soundbite.
Here's how you make sure it doesn't happen again. You make sure you have a president of the United States that when there's this kind of tragedy, doesn't say the reason things aren't getting better is because the people of Puerto Rico want us to do everything for them. In other words, he called people lazy while thousands were either dead or dying. He then said, wow, you're busting. In other words, you're not worth the money and the resources to help you. When you have a president of the United States that makes those kind of comments, well, and then gives himself an 8. Do you remember? Mm-hmm. He said, I deserve a 10. I deserve a 10. How many was it? Just 64. Just 64. 64 deaths is one death too many. But having said that, just 64, it wasn't just 64. He gave himself a 10. So we have a president of the United States who, when he sees a tragedy, says it's too much. Why? And in Omarosa's book, it's pretty clear, which I've read, right? It says, well, they were punishing the people of Puerto Rico because he wanted to punish Carmen Yulín, the mayor of San Juan, because she stood up forthright for the people of Puerto Rico. And you know something? If you go back to your clips, you will find she was absolutely right in calling the government out, especially now that we know of all of these deaths. So the people of the United States of America, I want to say something, because I've made 11, 12 trips. I just came back last week. Every time I go there, people say, Luis, make sure you thank the people of the United States of America, because you've rebuilt our houses, you've given us roof, you've given us food, you've given us love, you've given us attention. You're so much greater than the government of the United States of America. So I want to say a shout out to the people of the United States of America and tell them, keep working, keep fighting, let's rebuild her.
What a piece of garbage. The people of the United States are represented by the government. And by the way, the government did everything it could do. The problem was on the Puerto Rican side. The corruption of that woman. I had a chance to talk to the leader of Puerto Rico, and it was made clear when we were down there that the corruption and the cartels and all the things going around were very influential. But I want you to pay attention as we speak, and something I really didn't get until the last couple days. There are 3 key words to listen to hear, and almost every single time you hear a liberal or a Democrat talk about President Trump, they will use 3 words when they're talking about things he said. Quote, in other words, unquote. You heard him say President Trump said this, and in other words, he meant President Trump said that, but in other words, he meant. They are basically translating whatever they need to translate. I did find the comment, 64 deaths is one too many. I mean, what the hell does that mean? This is a guy who's forgotten about the talking points. But in other words, what he meant was, but I'm telling you guys, I had my eyes on it down there. I was down there the week after. And let me just real quick tell you, one of the most surreal things that I've ever seen in my life was we were in the government center where all the rescuers were and all the law enforcement was. There were thousands of people armed in that building for some reason. I have no idea why. But they were in the building. They weren't going out and doing anything. They were in the building. One of the nights they came, we were at a bar in one of the hotels in downtown Puerto. This is right after the week after this thing has just destroyed this country. We were in a bar that was packed. The music was playing. It was surreal to think that the world outside this hotel was destroyed. And we had 2 people join us who had helicoptered in. They had been in the mountains less than 24 hours earlier and had been to a town that was cut off, and the people in that town that were dying, the people that were staying alive by eating rats. They literally went into the hotel to the deli and ordered a sandwich. They were sitting there saying, this is surreal. I was watching people eat rats yesterday, and I'm eating a ham and cheese sandwich today in an air-conditioned bar where people are drinking and getting drunk. And it was one of those just out-of-this-world surreal moments. Anyway, Monday on CNN's Wolf, listen to Jim Acosta, who continues to make a complete douche out of himself, talking to Wolf Blitzer, talking about Trump and the wall.
We hear him talk about this out on the campaign trail from time to time, and what he says is that he will in some way get Mexico to pay for this wall somewhere down the road. And I suspect what you're going to hear from his advisors when this question comes up is they're going to say, well, some of the money that will go towards the wall will be in the form of some of this production that they think will come back to the United States as part of this renegotiated trade agreement. But in terms of how the president positioned this during the campaign, where there would be some sort of expenditure on the part of the Mexican government that would help finance the construction of the wall on the Mexican border, Wolf, we've heard from not a single White House official who's ever explained to us how that is ever going to happen. So it sounds like, for all practical purposes, the president has given up on that. But he's not given up on it, as you know, as a campaign tool. We hear about his vision for a wall at just about every campaign rally. And he claims falsely that what he presented to the voters during the campaign is being built on the U.S.-Mexico border. Of course, we know, Wolf, that there's very little wall construction going on down there. There's fence repairs and that sort of thing.
The media lying about the president lying. I mean, it can't get any more awkward than that. If you know what I mean. This is I've seen pictures of new wall fence going up. The bigger what I don't know what to call it. The new wall is still waiting funding, as we all know. But I mean, I have no Does anybody doubt it's going to get built? Everything else he said he was going to do, he's been doing. This next soundbite, I need you to listen to this because you may need to listen to it twice. The left has talked about, or if you listen to everybody talk about it, and we're at a point in time where, and I've said this, there is really no middle ground anymore. And it's not the divisive, it's the left. It's liberals, it's Democrats. They have at every turn tried to create divisiveness. This soundbite is the perfect example. This, in a nutshell, this is exactly who and what they are and what they've done. Listen to, on CNN's The Situation Room, listen to network legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin talking about President Trump. Listen to this.
He knows that if he starts to lose these evangelical leaders, that is not good for his grip on the base. So what does he do? Instead of giving them a general message about, look, vote for Republicans in the fall because we are backing your policy preferences, he turns it, as he does with so many things, into this Manichaean zero-sum struggle of good versus evil, divide and conquer. That's his way of trying to keep people on his side who are now basically stuck having endorsed him in 2016.
And Rachel, hold on one second. Rachel, he's been warning of a lot of disastrous things. For example, if he were to be impeached, but also if the Democrats take control.
Yeah, if Democrats impeach him, the stock market is going to crash and everyone's going to be poor.
Right.
I mean, he's lashing out. Clearly, he sees this as a serious threat. And a lot of Republicans that I've talked to on the Hill, especially after last week with the whole Michael Cohen debacle in court, they think they're going to lose the House. And so he's trying to, send the signal, trying to scare people into turning out. But honestly, if Democrats take the House, they can't roll back his policies. They're going to be more of a check on the president. They're going to be there to potentially start investigations and potentially impeach him. But, they won't be able to pass anything because they still have the Republican Senate, and he won't sign any of their bills. So that's just not true.
Jeffrey, go ahead.
Let's be clear also about what's going on here. The theme here is, I'm Donald Trump, and I'll protect you from the scary black people. Antifa is widely perceived as an African-American organization, and this is just part of the same story of LeBron James and Don Lemon and Maxine Waters and the NFL players and the UCLA basketball players. This is about black versus white. This is about Donald Trump's appeal to racism, and it just happens all the time, and we never say it, or we don't say it enough for what it is, but that's what's going on.
In other words, is exactly what every one of them are saying. I have never, not for a second, thought that Antifa was a mostly black organization. I don't know of anybody that does or has or ever did. I don't know that I've ever seen a black Antifa member, quite honestly. Every picture of Antifa I've ever seen are white college kids. They're not black. Antifa's not black. It never has been. They just told you, in other words, this is what he meant. In other words, this is what he's saying. And none of that's true. But the fact of the matter is the President of the United States is not the guy racially dividing things in any way, shape, or form. But that soundbite right there is one of the most embarrassing things I've ever heard. And it is the definition of the left creating a confrontation where one doesn't exist. In other words, you heard him say it. The president wants black versus white, which is nothing could be farther from the truth. But they know it, in other words. Meanwhile, I just got done reading Greg Jarrett's book about the FBI scandal and the Russia BS and all the other stuff. And in it, I was exposed to some pretty amazing stuff. Just blatant, out-and-out felonies and crimes committed by the Clintons. But Fox News, there's a report that China was hacking her private server in real time. And listen to Peter Schweitzer on the Ingram angle.
Think about this for a second. If this story's true, and the reporter that broke this story, Mr. Pollack, is an excellent reporter. If this story is true, it means that the only set of all of Hillary Clinton's emails as Secretary of State resides in Beijing, China. Because remember, she deleted 30,000 emails and never turned them over to the FBI. If you think about the Steele dossier, the concern that was always raised about that fake dossier was that it would lead to a blackmail on Donald Trump. These emails would be a massive blackmail tool for the Chinese against Hillary Clinton. Those 30,000 deleted emails were personal emails. They were probably very sensitive. That's why they were deleted in the first place. You have the existing set of the other 30,000. This is a huge story. And the fact that this information was discovered, then turned over to the FBI, and the FBI counterintelligence office, including Mr. Peter Strzok, apparently took no interest in it, is shocking. China is the big threat here. They are the rising power challenging the United States. Russia's the declining power. If I were looking at an intelligence threat, the number one threat would be China. That's what this FBI director today is saying. China's the one we're worried about. But there was no interest in this, apparently, by Mr. Strzok and others. It's a shocking story.
That was Peter Schweitzer talking to Laura Ingraham. Greg Jarrett has written a book, and it basically goes and itemizes the Clinton investigation. And I need you to read that if you can, because there are many, many things that have happened in and around that aren't they're not nebulous. They're not gray. There's no gray area. The fact of the matter is they committed felonies, open felonies, and not just them, but Brennan and Clapper and Comey, all of them. And he spells it out very clearly. Greg Jarrett does, the legal analyst from Fox. But apparently, since I think he had he might have had a DUI one time in his life, the left has made it out to be that this guy's a drunken fool who doesn't know anything. But apparently, the left is the purveyors of the glass house. Anyway, I would urge you to read that book because it is a fascinating revelation into the fact that there were multiple felonies and treasonous crimes committed. Finally, she's getting, I heard the other day that she was getting, her ratings are going up. I'm not really sure why, but Rachel Maddow is going to, I think she's going to try and I'm going to use air quotes here, defend Justice Department official Bruce Orr, who we know is all kinds of involved in the prosecution and the execution of this phony dossier. Listen to her explanation of what's going on around Bruce Orr.
That Justice Department official, that guy, is named Bruce Orr. And he is the object of conspiracy theories and condemnation on right-wing media on a 24-hour loop. And today, pro-Trump Republican members of Congress summoned Bruce Orr to testify behind closed doors before two separate Republican-led committees. And then, despite the closed-door nature of his testimony, those Republicans immediately went out to the cameras to talk to reporters about how Bruce Orr was a liar and to basically accuse him of being the rot at the heart of the Mueller investigation and the Russia scandal more broadly. The New York Times this weekend profiled Bruce Orr's long history in leading American law enforcement efforts against Russian organized crime. There is a Russian organized crime element to the Trump-Russia scandal. Today, House Republicans literally came back from their summer vacation early to spend the day trying to destroy Bruce Orr. From Politico.com today, quote, House Republicans have fixated on a handful of career Justice Department and FBI officials over the past year as they've sought to cast doubt on the legitimacy of the investigators who launched the Russia probe. First, the spotlight was on Jim Comey and Andrew McCabe, then Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. Now Republicans, intent on proving that political bias is behind the sprawling investigation of President Trump's ties to Russia, now Republicans are elevating a new bureaucratic target, Justice Department official Bruce Orr. You know, when they went after Peter Strzok, they were going after the top counterintelligence official at the FBI with experience in breaking up Russian intelligence operations on U.S. soil. In going after Bruce Orr today, they are trying to take out one of American law enforcement's top experts on Russian organized crime.
Every name that she named about prior to Bruce Orr, they were all found to be exactly what we thought they were. Mm-hmm. They conspired. They did the things she's saying they didn't do. She is a drama queen of epic proportions.
Oh, my Lord.
And you know, again, another person who I can watch her election night meltdown over and over again, and it's funner than watching 2004 highlights of the Red Sox.
I don't know about that.
It is, for me, anyway. Today's sound bites were very disturbing to me because we're getting to extremes now. We're going to talk to Congressman Jeff Duncan from the South Carolina 3rd after this short break, but hang on to that theme as we talk to him and Breitbart's Jerome Hudson. Back in just a minute.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson.
I want to actually take a couple of the references to Donald Trump from hip-hop. And then we're going to try to see if we can figure out why they like Donald Trump. Jay-Z said, I'm at the Trump International. Ask for me. Raekwon said, I'm the black Trump. They are comparing themselves to what he represents. His wealth, his achievement, capitalism.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson. Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125.
You're listening to the Curt Schilling Podcast. Once again, here's Curt Schilling.
Joining me now is from the South Carolina 3rd is Congressman Jeff Duncan. Good morning, Congressman. How are you?
I'm doing well, Curt. Thanks for having me on.
Let me open up the conversation by asking you, college football season's getting ready to kick off. How are you feeling about Clemson this year?
Well, I feel incredibly blessed to be a Clemson fan and to have us approaching another national championship, and excited. We've got a quarterback battle with Kelly Bryant and Trevor Lawrence, and the game this Saturday against Furman will give them both plenty of playing time to get comfortable going into Texas A&M the following week. So it's going to be a great season, and this is my time of year, Curt.
Yeah, there's a lot of college fans getting revved up. Hey, listen, you were listening in earlier. I was playing some sound bites, and there was a sound bite prior to the one you heard about Secretary Clinton and her email server, but it was basically a compilation of people on CNN talking about the fact, and I use these three words every time I hear liberals talk about President Trump. They say something he said, and then they say, in other words, what he meant was. And I realized that they've never been able to actually directly quote him because he hasn't said the things they want him to say, but they're reinterpreting what he says to mean what they need it to mean, and basically the soundbite I played this afternoon from CNN said they basically were saying about President Trump that he is making this about black and white. He is speaking to his evangelical base, and they are, and I think one of the reasons, and maybe you can correct me, but I believe it's because of the significant shift in the black vote. It's gone from 6%, it's close to 30% in support of this president for all the reasons we understand. And you're a living, breathing example of how this tax plan and business is booming with Google and your community. I wonder if you could talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The economy is humming because of tax reform, because of the president's policies and how he's challenging our adversaries, how he's challenging our allies, how he's renegotiating trade deals. We see African-American unemployment is way down. We have historic highs of African-Americans working, Hispanics working, women working. People are getting jobs, and the African-American community understands that that community works better when those folks have jobs and are actually contributing to society and spending that money usually with other African-American businesses, and it really, really works, and it's working in this economy.
I want to ask you, first of all, Google is looking at, I think it was something north of $600 million in a local investment for you guys, which and apparently this local investment in South Carolina will touch $2.4 billion when all is said and done. I want people to understand, Governor or Congressman, that is the definition of creating jobs, is it not?
Absolutely, and they're doing it because they're able to do it with repatriation of overseas dollars, with capital expenditure, depreciation expense, tax policy, with the ability. We're seeing companies after companies after companies increasing 401k, and we're increasing wages, giving bonuses, and hiring more Americans, and they're doing it here in South Carolina. And it won't just be Google. It'll be like the BMW concept that we had when BMW located here. All the residual business that wanted to be located near BMW and be suppliers for them. And then what you see, if you bring that many of employees into a state, you're going to see new housing, you're going to see quality of life projects happen. That's movie theaters, that's shopping centers, that's other things that people want to live near, and it's a tremendous economic boom. And so, South Carolina understands. That's why Boeing's here. That's why Volvo's here. Mercedes-Benz is here, and now Google and Amazon and others have located in our state, because we understand a positive business climate benefits everybody.
And not just located, but relocated to your state because of the business-friendly environment that South Carolina presents. Not to mention, I got to tell you, there's a subject of yours that I want to talk about. It's not a national subject until the left can use it to raise money or gain votes. But the disposal of nuclear waste is a big deal. It's not just a big deal for you and I. It's a big deal for our children and generations to come. And you guys have a site in Yucca Mountain that is pretty much pre-built. There's a significant movement afoot to find new storage places for this stuff, because it is the nastiest of nasty. I was wondering if you could talk to people about why Yucca Mountain, number one, and two, how and why do your constituents go along? They clearly absolutely trust you, because this is one of those things where the EPA or it used to be the EPA or the environmentalists that were protesting the pipeline would be, out in arms and protesting, and they're not. And there's reasons why. And I was wondering if you could kind of explain to readers and voters that how you've managed to do that.
Yeah, so I just came back from Yucca Mountain about a month ago, and my first trip out there, and standing on top of that mountain, looking at how desolate that area is, how arid that area is, and understanding that when Congress decided we were going to find a long-term repository for the nation's nuclear waste, both commercial waste and defense waste, they looked high and low all over the country for an ideal site, and they found Yucca Mountain to be the most geologically ideal site for a long-term repository for our nation's waste, which commercial waste sits at 121 sites around the country. And in South Carolina, in my district, we have the Oconee Nuclear Station, where 40 years' worth of waste, and that's spent commercial fuel, sits in dry cask storage on the shores of Lake Keowee, beautiful Lake Keowee. Heaven forbid anything happen there that would cause that lake to be contaminated. We have an ideal location to store that waste until its life runs out, and that's a million years from now. That spot is Yucca Mountain. It's been studied. The construction started. We have an ingress and egress tunnel. That means you can bring the waste in, and the trucks can leave after they drop it off. What we need to do now is build the actual vault. But the Obama administration and Harry Reid said, you know what, we're going to mothball that. They cut the funding out in 2010, actually showed up on site and told everybody to leave. A month later, there were still coffee cups sitting on the desk because everybody had to just pack up their desk and leave right then. That's how dramatic the Obama administration did to stop this. So we also in South Carolina understand we have commercial waste, but we have also defense waste. We have a place called the Savannah River site, which made the nuclear weapons for this country. And there's a lot of yucky stuff down there from creating the plutonium for our nation's weapons products. That waste needs to go somewhere, too. It's highly radioactive. The most ideal site is Yucca Mountain. And I'll regurgitate the words of former Governor and now Congressman Mark Sanford, who says Yucca Mountain is a national solution to a national problem. We have 4,500 tons of commercial spent fuel here in this state. We have 10,000 tons of defense waste at Savannah Riverside. That's not counting what's in Washington State with Hanford. That's not counting Idaho Flats. That's not counting Oak Ridge, where there's defense waste sitting and commercial waste sitting at another 120 sites around the country.
And all I can hear when you say that is jobs. The jobs, needed to, not just to make this happen, but the facility that's built will need to be staffed and stocked and again, jobs.
And Dye County, Curt, in Nevada is one of the poorest counties in the state. Although Nevada's a bunch of open land and not many people, Dye County wants this. And I would be willing to bet that if you polled most Nevadans outside of Las Vegas, you would find that they want it. And a lot of Las Vegans want it as well because of the jobs, because of the economic impact that the site would have. And we need to store this nuclear waste somewhere, get it off the shores of Lake Keowee and other sites around the country and store it there. And guess what? This is the law of the land. Congress passed this. It's the law to put the waste there. We're ignoring the law, and Congress is failing to appropriate the dollars to crank that Yucca Mountain site back open.
Hey, let me switch gears, Congressman, real quick. I want to ask you about the primaries last night. There were Arizona, Florida had some primaries, and I tweeted out during all of this that it's another indication that the blue wave is non-existent. And it was funny because the liberals came out and Democrats came out and said, you do realize a primary is about your own party. I said, no, my point is when you look at the influencers on these primaries, you see a very significant impact from President Trump and the candidates he was supporting. And then on the flip side, you have literally a socialist in Gillum who won, who has no chance. Listen, if he has a chance, then there's bigger problems than just these primaries. But the fact of the matter is, the Trump ticket won again last night, and this is something the media continues to try and misinform and ignore, and it's happening.
Yeah, you're exactly right. First of all, let me congratulate my colleague and good friend Ron DeSantis, future governor of the state of Florida. Ran a great primary to beat an establishment candidate down there with the Commissioner of Agriculture. And if you look out on the Democrat side in the Florida primary, you had Gwen Graham, who is an establishment Democrat candidate whose father was Bob Graham, former senator and governor of Florida, owner of the Washington Post, all the establishment ties that Gwen had, got beat by a very leftist, progressive, indivisible Bernie Sanders-type candidate. That ought to be alarming to the establishment Democrat Party first and foremost. But the Democrat candidate doesn't have a chance against Ron DeSantis, who has a bunch of money in the bank, who is an excellent campaigner, Harvard graduate, military background, JAG officer, one of the smartest guys I know, and he will be the governor of Florida. I'm excited about that. And then Martha McSally faces, Congresswoman Sinema out there in Arizona.
Yep.
And Martha McSally is a patriot. So she's going up against a protester, a career politician in Sinema. And Martha is a former A-10 pilot in the Air Force, an excellent patriotic American veteran, and who I enjoyed serving with in Congress, will now be the senator out there. So we had some great primaries there. Yep. We have great Republican candidates, and we will win those. There is no blue wave that I see out of last night.
I'm with Newt Gingrich. I think he said a couple months ago that he believes we're going to pick up 4 to 6 seats instead of this blue wave, and I absolutely feel like we're in that mode. And if you look at, and I played a soundbite earlier. They were talking about the fact that the left is, I think they're starting to catch on a little bit, and they're going into panic mode, that maybe it isn't going to be what they thought it was going to be, and it's going to be a rewrite of 2016 all over again. I believe that, because I believe what we're hearing from the CNNs of the world is not the world we're living in. And when you see things, well, listen, I don't know about you, but I heard a member of CNN talk about the fact that President Trump was bad-mouthing Antifa, and he said, and I quote, and most of us agree and believe that Antifa is a mostly black organization. And my first response was, I don't think I've ever seen a member of Antifa that was black, number one. And number two, I've never thought of it as an organization made up of minorities, ever.
I don't think Antifa is racial at all. I think it might be a mixture. I don't know. I don't know that much about the group other than it's ultra-liberal. It is actually anti what it talks about being anti. It says it's anti-fascist. Actually, a fascist organization using fascist tactics that are very resemblance of what went on in Germany prior to the rise of Nazism there, with intimidation and thuggery and that sort of thing. And so it's really a misnomer. But at the end of the day, it is very indicative of the vitriol that's out there, the vitriol that we even see coming out of the mouth of Maxine Waters when she incites violence against other elected officials. And I'll throw this out there. I challenge Paul Ryan to censure her or do something, because Maxine Waters is a member of Congress, and she was inciting violence against other members. And the speaker just asked her to apologize. And I thought that was a little bit weak.
Well, I'll say it because you can't. I'm tired. I'm ready for Mitch McConnell to go away. He's ineffective. He is not doing what the people have put him there to do. There are other ones in the Republican Party. And I did want to ask you one last question, though, before we head out. We're going to see a new speaker, and I'm wondering who you would support. I am an ardent Jim Jordan fan. I'm wondering who you're thinking about supporting for speaker.
Well, I'm a Freedom Caucus member, Curt, and I'm a founding member, one of the original guys there, and very conservative. I fully support Jim Jordan. I just got to see how Jim have a pathway to get 218 votes as necessary. And I also need Jim Jordan to call me and ask me for my support. I've yet to hear from him since we went on August recess. He has yet to call me. I don't like to be taken for granted, but I challenge Jim right now to at least pick up the phone and call me and ask me for my support. On the flip side of that, Kevin McCarthy has been a good majority leader. He was a good whip. He catches a lot of flack, but here's a guy who is very close to the president, speaks with him daily, has been a pretty good, fair leader to members of Congress. If you ask anybody, I don't care whether they're in the Freedom Caucus or more moderates, they will say Kevin has done a good job in trying to work legislation forward and meet our needs when we've tried. Kevin understands that we need conservatives in the room, regardless who the speaker is. We need to make sure that majority leader, that whip, that conference chair, and others, we have some slots that have conservatives in the room, because whoever is speaker, this is the biggest problem I've seen in Washington, whoever is speaker needs to listen to business leader, conservative members of Congress, and not the 30-somethings that are on their staff that are whispering in their ear. Sometimes they need to hear the hard truths, and that goes for any speaker. We see the cult of personalities happen in politics, and we see people that have grown up and their only working experience has been on the Hill, in the bubble, working in Congress, whispering in the ears of these leaders, telling them, well, we don't do it that way around here, or you can't do it that way. No, we actually need to break the mold and do things a little differently in Congress.
Congressman, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate it. Love to have you back.
Absolutely, Curt. Anytime. Look forward to it. God bless.
Thank you, sir. God bless. And go Clemson.
Breitbart News Tonight with Joel Pollack and Rebecca Mansour.
A lot of people not knowing what action they could or should take to make the difference. What I do is try to turn people on to sites like Breitbart, people who are writing and publishing the truth so that people will get educated. But, you kind of can't blame productive members of society who are kind of confused, perplexed as to what do we do to take this government back.
Sirius XM Patriot, Channel 125.
We want to hear from you. Tweet the show at Garrick38. Once again, here's Curt Schilling.
Joining me now is Breitbart's Jerome Hudson, a gentleman who I am honored to have on. Never have him on enough, never get enough time with him. Good morning, Jerome. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. It's great to be back on now.
Always a pleasure. I want to start off by, I played a soundbite earlier, and I want you to listen to the soundbite. And I'm just going to let you react to it after you hear it. Go ahead.
The theme here is, I'm Donald Trump, and I'll protect you from the scary black people. Antifa is widely perceived as an African-American organization, and this is just part of the same story of LeBron James and Don Lemon and Maxine Waters and the NFL players and the UCLA basketball players. This is about black versus white. This is about Donald Trump's appeal to racism, and it just happens all the time, and we never say it, or we don't say it enough for what it is, but that's what's going on.
You're really dropping the hammer right out of the gate. I don't actually believe my own ears. He said that Antifa is largely black or predominantly black. I mean, that is so far outside the realm of reality. In fact, I was really hoping that he would cite some study or something. I mean, that is just
Jerome,
absolutely undeniably false.
I still have I honest to God don't know that I've ever seen a black member of Antifa, a black person. Every Antifa rally I've ever seen are 24-year-old white kids.
But no, it's predominantly not black. And I mean, I thought I recognized that voice. But one thing that I will say, and I'll shut up, is that I actually felt a little bit good because his statements were so wildly ridiculous. And I think that while, something like that just the fact that Donald Trump has qualms with and takes them up publicly with people like LeBron James has nothing to do with race. And whenever someone actually makes that point, I mean, they demonstrably cheapen actual real life racism, both past and whatever episodic, episodes that do exist today. But I think there is also a kernel of hope here that the race card will just become so cheap then when people say ridiculous and idiotic things like this gentleman just said. I mean, it just will not move the needle at all.
That was CNN's network legal analyst, Jeffrey Toobin, by the way.
I knew it. I knew it.
Yep. Yep. But here's the other thing, Jerome. I've discovered something in listening to every day I play sound bites that aren't getting a lot of airtime, that for the most part, Breitbart's the only one making them public. I found 3 words that you will hear every single liberal or Democrat in a soundbite say, and the words are, in other words. And what they're saying is President Trump said this, but in other words, what he meant was, and it's a mind-reading, soothsaying, tarot card kind of a thing where, hey, listen, here's what he said, but I'm going to tell you what he actually meant, right? It's that what do they call it, the dog whistle?
Well, I guess, look, the psychological phenomenon of projecting your deepest subconscious feelings onto something else that someone said or some action that someone took, I mean, it's a real thing. And I don't really know what's in Jeffrey Toobin's heart, but his operating assumption is that the President of the United States is a virulent racist. And so anything that the president says that is actually criticism to someone who aligns politically with Jeffrey Toobin or his left-wing radical network, CNN, is automatically viewed through the prism of racism. There is absolutely no way that Donald J. Trump could actually have a criticism of something that LeBron James says, and Donald Trump's criticism not be rooted or based in some sort of racial animus that he has. I mean, it has been smack in the face to every person who is not white who has ever called Donald Trump a friend. I mean, for God's sakes, we just had Tiger Woods, who 20 years ago rejected his blackness when the media and the sports media was trying to impress it upon him that he was black and that he should be black in all things black. The man rejected it. And then a couple of days ago, Tiger Woods says, no, I've known Donald Trump. I mean, it's a smack in the face to people like Tiger Woods. The man has lived a great life, has almost ruined his life, and is now trying to resurrect his life, right? He has no reason to defend Donald Trump if Donald Trump was actually a hood-wearing Klansman. Why would Tiger Woods defend that? He knows the man not to be a racist.
Well, isn't that the textbook definition of your? Listen, guys, you're too stupid to realize what so we're going to tell you what's happening. You're too stupid to get a government-issued ID to vote, so we'll help you. That feels like what this is.
Yeah, I mean, I just said it's offensive, but no, it really is insulting. Look, I'm in Los Angeles, and for the last 3 nights, Curt, I have had conversations at 2 bars and then a rooftop bar with 3 individuals, an older white gentleman who made it a point to me that his name is also Jerome. He just loved that. An almost 30-year-old first generation Indian, and then a 30-something-year-old real estate agent, a woman. And all 3 of these people are supporters of Donald Trump. They do not endorse his Twitter handle for the most part. They don't know the man personally, and so they can't say if they like or dislike him, but they are wholehearted supporters of his policies. They live in fear in this city because liberals are so close-minded, and they are so rigidly they will attack you if you say anything that is anywhere remotely positive of the president. But I am constantly filled with hope. I'm telling you, 3 nights in a row, I just randomly going out and sitting down next to people. Don't ask me how it's happened, but I think it's providential. And I think that it is also evidence that people like Jeffrey Toobin and CNN, their influence, they are laughable. The ratings are cratering. The president's polls either remain stagnant, which is impressive in this anti-Trump media climate, or they're climbing. When you have people like Michael Cohen and Lanny Davis apparently coming out just telling both lies about the president, his polls are still rising.
Yeah. No, I'm. It's one of the reasons why, like I said, last night when I was looking into these primaries, I said something on Twitter about, your blue wave is laughable. The Democrats were coming back saying, "Oh, you realize the primaries are just races within your party." Of course, I said, "No, you know what I'm trying to say." Actually, the Republican turnout in Florida for the vote for the Republican primaries, there was 120,000 more Republican voters than there were Democrats. That's what I'm talking about. That we are those 3 people you met in California. It's you didn't find a shooting star 3 nights in a row. There are more Trump-supporting Americans than the media would ever have you believe, because it's terrified. I mean, the fact of the matter is, we know for a fact that the black vote has gone from 6% Trump in 2016 to close to 30%. My understanding, based on research and reading and talking to people in the political arena, was that the day the black vote went above 15%, Republican, was the last day of a Democratic president in our lifetimes. And I firmly believe that that's happening because nobody you could argue that the most benefited and the most catered to, not catered to, but the people benefiting the most from Trump's policies are middle-class Americans and minorities. They are at a record number of employment. There are a record level low of unemployed people. And Well, the left would have you believe it's because Obama was really charging the economy when he left, which I laugh at. But the fact of the matter is, Jerome, I'm feeling like the left is all about making sure this is black versus white instead of socialist versus capitalist.
No, you're absolutely right. I can't actually remember who it was, but it was an Obama cabinet member, and it was in 2009, and they helped me out. It was a woman. The name is just escaping me. When the Tea Party became resurgent, and it was evident that it was going to be a serious political movement, this woman said that we'd rather talk about race than the issues that this organization, this grassroots movement is talking about. And it was then almost 10 years ago. It was a way for you to just see into the mind, right, and the political logic of the left. I don't think that they don't have anything else but the race card, but the gender card. Why? Because if their ideas were ever challenged, and they'd crumble, and they'd always fall.
Right.
And I think what people actually forget is that historically the economy did start to come back under Barack Obama.
Right.
But what happened? I mean, he lost the House, right? And that is the purse of the country. And so business owners, people who take risks, people who hire, they started to see Republicans winning elections. It's what I'm saying is not coincidence. And you're absolutely right. This president keeps winning, not necessarily because of his personality, but because of his policies. And like average Americans see it. Their paychecks are getting bigger. They're getting bonuses. I mean, people are able to hire more. I mean, it's amazing what the reality is. And I mean, I guess you're right. I've just been smacked against it, meeting real people who actually support the man's policies. But I got to tell you, I mean, to your point, I don't see a blue wave. I mean, I think that a lot of these races are going to be close. I think that a lot of these congressional district races, they're going to be won or lost district to district. But Joel Pollak, our senior editor at large, he lives here, and he knows a lot about California politics. And he's saying that there have been several congressional races where Republicans have outvoted the Democrats here in California in left-wing baby Russia. And so what you saw with the 120,000 Republicans outvoting Democrats in Florida, I mean, it's just, again, another evidentiary point that I don't know what this blue wave is. And with these socialists actually winning, like Andrew Gillum is a corrupt mayor of Tallahassee. He's probably one reason why I moved out of the city to Lenny Curry's Jacksonville. When his policies are put up against Ron DeSantis, I just don't know how they appeal to those blue dog Democrats who support Donald Trump's policies when they look at Venezuela and this guy's embracing socialism.
Jerome, I think it's just like when Trump was elected. You didn't see the yard signs with Hillary Clinton around a place like this where it's completely Democratic here. And I think what you're going to find is you got the people who hate him. They're just going to the poll because they hate him. They want him out of there no matter what. And then you have the people who are sort of not following but then benefiting from Trump.
Right.
And then you have the sympathetic people who are like, okay, enough is enough. He cannot be that bad. Because if you keep bashing, eventually that's going to turn around and go against you. And I think you can tell by the numbers on CNN. You can tell by the way that, the medias who are so negative, people are tired of the negative. And when they're getting a plus, like the money coming back and new jobs and better living conditions and stuff, that's going to outweigh it. But it's going to be silent because we still feel like today we cannot speak up about being Republican.
Well, we've learned, to piggyback on our point, we've learned that our Justice Department, our law enforcement agencies can do anything they want inside your private life. I've never been polled, still to this day. I've never been polled. But I know, based on the polls that I was being told prior to the last presidential election, that Americans aren't being truthful. And there's a reason. That in and of itself should be a scary message. Americans are afraid to voice their political support on their own telephones, and we've been given legitimate reasons why. The government can destroy you even if you don't do something wrong if they don't like who you are.
I mean, I'll address that point first. I believe that Hillary Clinton was up in the Real Clear Politics average of polls by about 16 points.
Yeah.
The day that she canceled her $1 million fireworks buy, right, in New York City, that was a week before the election. So a week before the election, she knew, her campaign knew, and I'm sure the Obama White House knew, you're not going to win this. You might want to get that seven-figure check back for those fireworks. But the polls had her up by 16 points. I'm sure a lot of that was media-driven. They oversample Democrats or
and
whatever.
We know they did. Carville told us they did.
Right. What Sean is saying is amazing because I have heard he's an anchor on the Young Turks. He's a leftist guy. He disagrees with Donald Trump 99% of the time. I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to embarrass him, but
he's an asshole.
He is one of those leftists who was radically against Donald Trump, wasn't in love with Hillary Clinton, but widely preferred her over him, right?
Right.
But he has realized, and he said this on Larry King's show a couple days ago, is that all of his worst nightmares and assumptions about what a Donald Trump presidency would look like, none of those things have happened. Homosexuals have not been strung up in the streets or thrown into internment camps, right? There is not a race war that the media told us there would be. Like women, and especially minority women have benefited from the man's economic decisions over the last 20 or so months. I mean, the very people who rejected him, I mean, he did get educated white women, a majority of them over Hillary Clinton, but the smallest demographic of people who actually voted to put him into office have benefited the most over his economic policies. And then, of course, you do have the people who support him. They've always supported him. And as long as he continues to fulfill his promises, they will stick by him, as long as he doesn't turn into Arnold Schwarzenegger. And then you do have those people who are in the middle. They're not incredibly ideological, but they, like you said, have seen their lives change. Like physically, they can see their taxes being lowered.
They're rational people, Jerome. They understand that. They understand an extra $110 a month on their paycheck is because of the new tax plan. And by the way, the gentleman you're mentioning, his election night meltdown is something I've watched more than once on YouTube. It is one of my favorite. We got into a Twitter spat about 2 months ago, and I called it. I laughed. I said, "Hey, this video's aging well." And he came back just like, "Oh, you stole money from Rhode Island." I was like, "Really? That's all you got for me?"
Yeah.
So, hey, listen, we're gonna I'm gonna talk to Vin. We're gonna make this a weekly thing. I need to have you back more often. I love talking to you, and we definitely need to hook up in public and have. I would love to see you and I go around talking to school age groups. I think we could do a wonderful thing going around to high schools around this country and talking to kids.
Well, I have
because I'm the whitest guy you're ever gonna know. I mean, just give me 30 seconds to dance for you, and you'll know everything you need to know about my whiteness.
But you're a great American. You are.
Love you, buddy. Take care of
you,
yourself. All right. I'm moving away from winners and losers and using this last segment as a way to kind of give my opinion. But I have Shonda here today, and it's a relevant day in our lives. We raised a son who was on the spectrum. And school year, first day of school, was never normal for us, or especially for her, and definitely for him. And I was wondering, honey, if you could talk about what it's like for people that may wonder about their child, and they're having the thoughts you had before you knew Grant was diagnosed. How can you help them kind of make today a little bit easier on kids that are either on the spectrum or they're wondering if they are? Because change is a nightmare for these kids. And the first day of school we were always very afraid of it.
Yeah. Well, you're afraid of the whole school year, too. I mean, you're afraid of, and it depends, in elementary school, it's all about talking about beforehand. This is your backpack. This is the time. Giving them the schedule so nothing is a surprise for them. But when you get to middle school and high school, you start to worry about how will
the social stuff.
Well,
the
how,
groups and popularity.
Well, just you go from one teacher who gets your kid, and you may go off to gym or something like that. But it's also about, how will these new 6 or 7 teachers work with my son? Will they be good? Will they be out of patience? Because they're not going to be all good. And how do we learn to handle that?
We've been lucky. Our kids went through IEPs, and you were very involved when I played, and I managed to be able to be somewhat involved afterwards. But we've run into times when you and I have run into a teacher we knew didn't understand our child. And I guess that's one of the things I'm wondering. What would you recommend? And by the way, guys, my wife wrote a book called The Best Kind of Different, and you can check it out. It's always available on Amazon.com. But I was wondering if you could talk to people about, hey, your child has clearly has a teacher that doesn't get them. How do you intercede or involve yourself in that without kind of ruining the experience for your child?
Well, I think first of all, if you know right away that your teacher's not going to mesh or be good to you go with your gut instinct. And I think that's one of the things that after Grant was diagnosed, I knew he was different, but I just didn't know how different he was. Teachers, I'm hoping, are different now. It's hard to tell somebody who has a first child that their child isn't perfect, because we all live thinking our child is perfect.
Or a teacher with no kids.
No kids, or, the old kind of teaching where everybody learned the same way. It's not like that anymore. But, certainly if you're a teacher and your child and you can't bridge that, you have every right to ask to switch teachers because you want it to be a good experience.
But there's only one. This is a one-time thing for your child. They're going through high school once and only once. Right. And I think back to when you and I were growing up, how many kids now, when you look back, who high school was an absolute nightmare for them only because we didn't understand that they were just different.
Well, not only that, some of them were just put into the special education classes, so they didn't learn to socialize. Now these kids go to school with all types of kids from kindergarten up, and they are able to, better function in the world because the typical kids learn to have sympathy for the kids that aren't typical, and they are easier be able to mimic them, which helps them in the world. But no, it's every year I worry, and now he's off to college, and I worry, that kids on the floor might not treat him. I mean, I can't even tell you the fear.
I was just going to say, the thing that you've taught me, and I don't have it, you do, that women's intuition. Mm-hmm. More times than not, you've gone with your gut, and I don't know that it's ever failed you. And I guess what I'm trying to say to you people out there listening, who maybe you have a neighbor that has a child, that a lot of people are in denial. A lot of people will have kids on the spectrum and refuse to admit that their child is on the spectrum, to the detriment of the child. Right. It doesn't help the child that you don't acknowledge their issues. Life became, and I'm using air quotes, a lot easier for us when we understood what it was Grant had. Yeah. Everything fell into place. Everything made sense. The fact that he and I butted heads every day of our lives, not because we were so different, but I think because we were so similar in many ways.
Well, it had to do with voice and getting used to him. But I think that, the one thing we all have to remember is no child wants to be bad. They don't grow up thinking, you know what, I want to be the worst kid in the class. Right. That every child is different. Every child that you're raising is different, and that we have to learn to embrace what is different about them.
Once you meet a child with Asperger's, you've met a child with Asperger's.
Only one. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're so drastically different. And I would tell you the thing I've learned from my son is that I would beg God to have a heart as big and open and as loving as his is. He is the most inclusive, loving young man that I've ever known. And
so that's hard when the teacher doesn't reciprocate that.
Right. Yep.
But you know what? I always look at it that, they'll run into this. There's no way they're going to get through life with perfect children and perfect,
I thought it was an appropriate topic for today, back to school. And for those of you that don't know, go check out Shonda's Facebook page, because every year, the first day of school, she does some annoyingly amazing stuff to our kids. First day back to school. The book is called The Best Kind of Different. You can find it at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, anywhere good literature is sold. My wife, yes, I'm married to a sexy New York Times bestselling author. It's pretty hot, actually. You guys have a wonderful day. God bless. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks again to Congressman Duncan and Jerome Hudson. Catch up with you guys tomorrow.
Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlow.
Jeannie in Pennsylvania.
I think we've gotten away from what we really hired him to do, which is draining the swamp. If you look at the real picture of draining a swamp, you go in and you take all the water out of it. What does it leave? It leaves the gunk. He cannot get rid of the gunk. We have to get rid of the gunk. Everything he's doing, he's lowering the water so we can see who needs to go. The only way they can go is if we vote them out.
Breitbart News Daily. Weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern on Sirius XM Patriot 125.